Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. DOGE just got the right to audit Social Security for waste, fraud, and abuse. Elon Musk has talked nonstop about massive amounts of fraud inside Social Security. DOGE even has embed employees at Social Security. They work for Social Security, but they perform DOGE functions. They've been blocked by a court from looking at the information to determine, okay, if you say there's fraud, go ahead and prove it. They actually work for the Social Security Department. So why would they not be able to do something like that? A lawsuit prevented it. The government appealed the case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, yes, you can actually look at what's going on inside the Social Security Department if you work for Social Security. You would hear people say, well, what are these claims of fraud? How could you say that we have people using stolen Social Security numbers? How can you say we have thousands of the same people using the same number? Which is a pretty clear indication of fraud or some type of wrongdoing. And sure, they have a point. If you can't actually go in there and in a detailed way check out what's going on, you can't really say there's a lot of fraud. It's hard to prove if you don't have access to the data. Now DOGE has access to the data. But DOGE doesn't really have access to Elon Musk. DOGE is still operating. They're actually hiring more people. But Elon Musk is out. And I'll deal with that first. I'll deal with that right now, real quick. There are some things going on behind the scenes we'll never know about. And I can't tell you what went down exactly. I wasn't there. I don't know all the inside conversations and issues. I'm sure it's complicated. But here's something that's simple that no one else is talking about. From CNBC, Musk's role leading DOGE qualifies as continuing and permanent according to a federal judge. This is Judge Chutkan, just one of the many judges trying to put Trump in prison before the election. She was unsuccessful then, but she's trying to help now as much as she can to prevent DOGE from doing its work. If this judge was successful and able to manipulate what DOGE could and could not do, and would have access to do depositions of all the DOGE people, it would be an issue for the government. It might actually stop DOGE somehow. The Supreme Court has supported the administration, but at some point, even when the Supreme Court supports the administration, sometimes they let certain things go through, like the so-called Maryland Man case, where the Supreme Court said you can't order the federal government to effectuate a foreign policy, but you can order them to facilitate a foreign policy, essentially. By Musk leaving the government, and very publicly leaving the government, and burning bridges behind him, he's not going to be subjected to the kinds of depositions and lawsuit activity he otherwise would have been subject to, or at least possibly could have been subject to. It shuts a door on a lot of what he did at DOGE, or at least what he could potentially do in the future. DOGE's win on Social Security is really massive. It's a big win. And that's because Social Security facilitates about $1.3 trillion in payments every year from the Treasury. Social Security is the largest expenditure of taxpayer receipts in the entire government. That's $1.3 trillion, $1,300 billion every year. And that does need a careful review. From the Washington Post, Supreme Court lets DOGE access Social Security data of millions of Americans. And as you would expect, Senate Democrats are not so happy about this. From FedScoop, Senate Democrats seek audit of DOGE access to Social Security systems. There are powerful people in government that know exactly what's been going on with all of those $1.3 trillion going out the door every year, and they don't want anybody looking at it. But DOGE is going to look at it, and they can propose a bill. It's not going through, and they have no way to stop this now. That won't stop them from complaining. Common Dreams has this to say: dangerous power grab as Supreme Court sides with DOGE on Social Security data. Quote, this action by 6 far-right justices at the Supreme Court is an affront to every principle of government transparency and the rule of law. The complaint is there's too much transparency going on. And that is by definition not transparent. It seems like kind of the opposite. And Mark Elias's operation, Democracy Docket, not so happy. Supreme Court allows DOGE access to Social Security data. And yes, Musk is out of DOGE. But the operation continues, with many employees already working at the individual departments as part of the departments, not just part of DOGE. From the New York Times, after his Trump blow-up, Musk may be out, but DOGE is just getting started. That's from the New York Times. It ain't going anywhere. Russell Vought had this to say: DOGE will be far more institutionalized at agencies. And Wired, which is no fan of DOGE and no fan of Elon Musk, reports that DOGE is on a recruiting spree. They say this: while Elon Musk and Donald Trump post through their breakup, DOGE shows no signs of slowing down, and potential recruits are being told they can make up to $195,000 a year. And I'm sure that's just cash, not including all the benefits. And what's great is that some people who don't even care about money, and other people who are wealthy, billionaires, self-made, successful people, want to work for the government and want a way to use their talents and their abilities and their connections to help the actual country. Some of them may have self-interest, that's okay. But people are putting themselves into the government to do something good. And even when the bad guys win one, at least temporarily, that doesn't mean they actually win. From ABC News, Elon Musk is gone, but DOGE's actions are hard to reverse. The U.S. Institute of Peace is a case study. And I've covered this story a few times because it's so fascinating. They had to have marshals come in and pull these guys out of the building. Then, in my opinion, a corrupt Washington, D.C. judge who tried to say that this nonprofit, the U.S. Institute of Peace, has a right to have no oversight from the federal government because somehow as a nonprofit, even though the federal government is supposed to have some oversight over it, they're allowed to run riot and do whatever it is that they want to do without being questioned on it. This case is already on appeal, and like all these other kinds of cases, I expect the federal government will win, and the whole thing will finally permanently be shut down. What DC was never ready for was AI coming in, being used by brilliant people. Here's an example from ProPublica inside the AI prompts that DOGE used to munch contracts related to veterans' health. DOGE people came in and they used AI, something like ChatGPT, to look at contracts that the Veterans Department was doing to make sure that all contracts that were outside of actually helping veterans and their health were canceled. Every bit of the federal government that people try to utilize for their own personal benefit never expected AI would be part of the equation. But it's a very big part of the equation now thanks to DOGE. And thanks to Elon Musk. Eventually, I do expect Musk and Trump to make some kind of a peace. I think what Musk was doing was a personal power move. He's been through a lot with his companies. He's been through a lot personally. He sacrificed a lot. Or at the very least made an investment for his own benefit to try to work with Trump and help the government. He's his own man. He can make his own decisions. His employment is up with the government. And DOGE lives on to work inside the government and inside government agencies to benefit the American people. Ain't nothing wrong with that. From the Washington Post, Supreme Court lets DOGE access Social Security data of millions of Americans. The orders were another example of the Supreme Court granting a Trump administration emergency request to lift or scale back lower court rulings blocking his initiatives. There are many national injunctions against the Trump administration. Many, an absurd amount. However, he has been pushing his policies very aggressively. He is in the right. You cannot have policies be reversed by a local district judge, one of, say, 700, who, if you go and you shop to the right judge, he can block an entire federal policy when he's a little judge working out of somewhere in California or Maryland. They're unelected. Also keep in mind, none of these executive orders that come out of the White House aren't first looked at by attorneys to make sure they're legal. They have a whole department for that. Some may view them as not legal, but the White House does view them as legal, and they've been reviewed by proper attorneys. The Supreme Court has delayed responding on a lot of these national injunctions and the whole issue of national injunctions realistically for far too long. They will address this one, they will address that one on what's called like the emergency docket. So if the Trump administration makes an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court to try to get a national injunction removed, sometimes the Supreme Court will take it up quickly and say, okay, without even further papers for now, yes, take away this ridiculous national injunction. Or this order referring to DOGE Social Security employees not even being able to do their jobs while they're at Social Security. They were all vetted. They were all trained. They're supposed to be there looking at the data. What we have building up over time is a massive number of very aggressive policies from the Trump administration, well within his right to do, legal, at least according to the White House legal team, that approve in advance all of these policies. It's almost like you see a dam with a lot of water right behind a dam waiting to break. At some point, whether it's tomorrow or a month or 6 months from now, the Supreme Court will come back and they'll announce their ruling on national injunctions with some kind of strict limitation on what a local judge can do to block policy that's a national policy when they're just a local federal district judge. That one future Supreme Court ruling will release a massive wave of Trump policies almost simultaneously. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. And then beyond that moment, after the policies are unleashed, future policies will be released that won't be subject to these kinds of national injunctions. It will get quite interesting. A divided Supreme Court on Friday sided with the Trump administration in 2 cases involving DOGE, whose efforts to slash government agencies and obtain data about Americans have mostly been shrouded from public view. The justices cleared the way in the first case for DOGE representatives to access the sensitive Social Security Administration data of millions of Americans, and let's also face it, illegal aliens that were given Social Security numbers. There are many, many there, while litigation on the matter continues. In the second case, the High Court shielded DOGE, which stands for the Department of Government Efficiency, from having to immediately disclose records to a government watchdog group seeking information about the service. The court's 3 liberal justices disagree with the conservative majority's actions in both cases, with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson warning of, quote, grave privacy risks for millions of Americans. How can there be a grave privacy risk for anyone if the employees of Social Security who are a part of a DOGE division inside the agency go through the same restrictions, the same training as anyone else that works for the company that has access to that data? The risk isn't to the Americans. The risk is to the people who are taking money out of the Social Security Department that they should not be taking. Taken together, the orders were another example of the Supreme Court granting most of the Trump administration's emergency requests to lift or scale back lower court rulings, blocking his initiatives while legal challenges play out. Those judges weren't elected, and all of these policies have been vetted by attorneys. So what's the nonsense here? Stop with the delay tactics. The justices have allowed the administration to bar transgender troops from the military, fire independent agency leaders without cause, halt teacher grants, and remove protections for as many as 350,000 Venezuelans, while legal challenges to all those efforts make their way through lower courts. The court has also cleared the way for Trump to revoke legal status for more than 530,000 illegal aliens. The exceptions have come in cases involving the due process rights of illegal aliens targeted for fast-track deportation. In such cases, the justices have required the government to provide notice and opportunity for the illegal aliens to challenge their removals. This refers to the actions under the Alien Enemies Act, which is the full discretion of the executive branch because they're responsible for national security and they're responsible for immigration. That's why immigration courts take place in the executive branch. Any involvement by the judicial branch is meddling that doesn't belong there. But okay, you want to go ahead and do it. But when it comes to national security, stop playing games with the executive branch. Justice Jackson used her lengthy dissent in the Social Security case on Friday to criticize her colleagues in the majority for, quote, jettisoning careful judicial decision-making and more broadly for allowing the administration's initiatives to take effect, even though lower courts have not yet ruled on the legality of those measures. She's also said in prior dissents and publicly in questioning cases that were brought before the Supreme Court, why can't we just let the lower courts slow everything down? And the answer to that is because they're playing a game. It's not about legality. It's about trying to slow down policies that are legal policies from the federal government. You can't do that. The federal government exists to carry out the policies of the citizens of the country that elect the leaders of the federal government. It's not there to play games to push social agendas. Ketanji suggested the court has different rules for the Trump administration, largely granting its emergency requests when the only emergency is that the government cannot be bothered to wait. Quote, that sentiment has traditionally been insufficient to justify the kind of extraordinary intervention the government seeks, according to Jackson, who was joined by Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Quote, but again, this court dons its emergency responder gear, rushes to the scene, and uses its equitable power to fan the flames rather than extinguish them. Justice Elena Kagan noted that she too would have denied the administration's request. The Trump administration had asked the justices to intervene after a federal judge in Maryland, in one district, one little area, said DOGE representatives appear to have violated privacy laws by viewing the personal data of some of the more than 70 million Americans who receive Social Security benefits. In siding with the administration on Friday, the majority said it considered factors such as the public interest and the government's likelihood of success on the underlying legal questions. Because you can't tell the government they're not allowed to look at what's going on within the government. If you are not going to look at what's going on in the government when you're the government, who is going to look at it? Literally no one except the people that know how to steal from the government. Someone actually does have to look at what's going on and use AI and use their expertise, find out what's being stolen and put a stop to it, and then hold the people accountable who have been stealing from the American people. And in my opinion, because no one has been looking at these things carefully enough and no one has been being held accountable, there's a lot of stealing going on and we just don't know about it. At least not yet. Quote, we conclude that under the present circumstances, SSA may proceed to afford members of the SSA DOGE team access to the agency records in question in order for those members to do their work, according to the unsigned order. DOGE has faced several lawsuits over its attempts to access agency records, as well as over Elon Musk's influence in the federal government as a temporary employee of the White House who was not confirmed or vetted by Congress. Or elected, as they like to say. But he doesn't need to be, because he was an advisor. But he's not an advisor anymore. He's not even friends with the president anymore. And now that one avenue is closed. 2 labor unions and an advocacy group, so not even like direct individuals, went to court to try to block DOGE's access to data at the Social Security Administration, saying such access created a major privacy and security risk for their members and raised concerns among retirees about their benefits. The Federal Privacy Act says only employees who need the information to carry out their job responsibilities should have access to Social Security records. And that exactly is the DOGE employees who were there to check out who's been stealing what from whom. And to also correct things like having people listed as still alive when they're 120 or 150 or 302 years old. Someone has to correct that. It can't just go on forever. U.S. District Judge Ellen Lipton Hollander temporarily blocked DOGE and its affiliates from working with Social Security data. Judge Hollander, a nominee of Obama, said DOGE essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at SSA in search of a fraud epidemic based on little more than suspicion. It's a little suspicious that you literally have millions of people listed as alive until DOGE corrected it with like over 12 million people when they're over 120 years old. There's no legitimate explanation for this. We're not talking about some small business and their accounting records look a little funny. You're talking about $1.3 trillion a year to this one department. So could you at least get some of your data relatively accurate and then give us a time window of when you can get all of the data completely accurate? Or was the data being left inaccurate for a reason? Does that open a few extra new places and new opportunities for people to do things and maybe not get caught? Looks like we're going to find out. Solicitor General D. John Sauer, who represents the administration at the Supreme Court, told the justices that the DOGE team had an urgent, legitimate business need to subject the government's records to much-needed scrutiny as part of the president's efforts to streamline government and modernize outdated systems. Lawyers for the advocacy group Democracy Forward told the Supreme Court justices that Hollander's order blocking access to birth dates, driver's license numbers, and health and wage information is narrow and temporary, and called Trump's actions a sudden and striking departure from generations of precedent spanning more than a dozen presidential administrations. The coalition led by Democracy Forward said it was disappointed by the decision. Quote, "This is a sad day for our democracy and a scary day for millions of people." And you can even imagine how scared those people are that don't actually exist, that are somehow stealing money from the system. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're completely legitimate. But by the time the auditing is done, we're going to know. But they went on to say this. They said their group, quote, "will continue to use every legal tool at our disposal to keep unelected bureaucrats from misusing the public's most sensitive data as this case moves forward." The elites are upset, and they're not going to get away with this anymore. Musk was great, but DOGE goes on without him.